Survive in advance was the plan, and that's been working the last several weeks for Ole Miss, but too many turnovers got in the way in the swamp. Welcome in, everyone, to Ole Miss Postgame Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Of course, that is Leanne Herring, and I'm Mark, and here we are, wins or losses. And unfortunately for the Rebels, it was a third loss today, going down to the Gators 24-17. Leanne, how you doing other than watching this one?
It was a tough one to watch. Again, an early storyline that we talked about early in the season that really was difficult for Ole Miss was the missed opportunities. I think, again, Mark, this could be the same to be said in this game down in Gainesville. I mean, a lot of missed opportunities for Jackson Dart offensively, and as elite as this Ole Miss defense has been, I think when it was all said and done, that we've been talking a lot about you can't underestimate DJ Lagway, even not at 100%. You can't underestimate this Florida ball club that found a way, much like they did against LSU for the second week in a row, to be able to shut down the Dreams. Last week we saw it against LSU, and this week it was a repeat. Billy Napier just did a heck of a job, in calling this game. Again, Florida didn't go out of its comfort zone when it came down to standing on business today. They played a lot of situational ball. They were able to make big plays in third downs. And we were talking about it before we went on air. You have to give a shout out to a lot of the young talent because, again, this Florida team was built on a lot of young talent, a lot of true freshmen, including DJ Lagway, really set his tone offensively. But a player that I want to mention that I think pretty much that will stand in the memory of Ole Miss Rebels fans today was Bryce Thorne. Bryce Thorne with, that first INT that he gave late in the game that was called back as an incomplete pass, gave Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin a little bit of light hope with just a few seconds left on the clock, hoping that they would answer. And I think a lot of Rebels thought that Jackson Dart would be able to execute as in Jackson Dart fashion. But unfortunately, Bryce Thorne came up again. The young freshman came up again with another INT to pretty much ice this game. But again, what a tough way for the Ole Miss Rebels to go out. But again, a lot of missed opportunities. I know that a lot of people were concerned with Trey Harris being out, and that was a big blow. But again, Mark, we've seen the Rebels be able to dominate offensively without Trey Harris. But I think the biggest turning point for this Ole Miss offense, and I've said it from the jump, begins with the trenches. And I think the loss of our center really was a difference and change was a change in pace for this Ole Miss offense, because I said this Ole Miss offensive line was going to have to be clutch in this game. This Florida defense was an elite. We saw that in the very last, more certain in the third quarter, that they were playing a lot of soft coverage. So it wasn't a question that Jackson Dart in this offense could get past this Florida defense, because like I said, they were playing a lot of soft coverage. But again, the loss of our center really didn't allow our offensive line to be able to be as productive as it has in the past, to keep Jackson Dart clean in the pocket. And these last 2 minutes were really crucial. We saw that Jackson Dart throwing two interceptions or three interceptions. I can't remember what the final count was. I mean, that's the most that Jackson Dart thrown in his career of 2 years. So sad way for the Rebels to go out. Obviously, we've talked about with 3 losses, it would take a miracle upon a miracle, but let's be realistic here. The Florida Gators did it again and being able to be spoiler, and the Rebels the playoff dreams are out. But again, a lot of missed opportunities for the Rebels. We've talked about that. There's obviously a lot of talent here, but today, unfortunately, in the swamp, which we knew would be a difficult atmosphere to play in, this talent couldn't execute enough. Again, a very underestimated Florida Gator offensive and defensive front.
Yeah, and for anybody that didn't see the end of the game, what's going to be talked about a lot is what Leanne just covered there, because the last 2 Ole Miss possessions, with the offense really struggling in the second half, they still had a couple shots in plus territory against the Gators defense. And the first one, you had Jackson Dart throwing into triple coverage, and then the Thornton interception that Leanne just referenced. So triple coverage, he went for the deep shot into the end zone. Excellent play in the back of the end zone on a diving catch by Bryce Thornton. There was about a minute and a half left. Ole Miss had all its timeouts, so the defense was able to rise up, stop Florida without gaining a first down, get the ball back with not plenty of time, but with definitely enough time that we've seen teams score every week. In that situation, the Rebels crossed midfield. They actually got into a good place where they could take reasonable shots into the end zone. And then Dart throws another pick down the left sideline, but it was trapped. It was obvious on the replay. It was not a controversial play. It was an obvious trap, even though Jackson Dart and everybody was going crazy in the stadium. Dart thought he had thrown a pick, walked off the field, but it was pretty obvious based on replay. So he gets another shot. Very next play, miscommunication along the right sideline where Juice Wells stopped. He found a place in the zone coverage where he thought Jackson was going to throw him the ball. Jackson was looking for the down and out and up the sideline and threw it to that place. And Thornton made another play, and he was right there to end the game in Ole Miss's college football playoff hopes. Again, as Leon just said, not necessarily dead 100%, but like the ESPN playoff indicator showed that if Ole Miss would have won this game, they were at 84% with a loss at 4%. And that's pretty much it right there.
No, and like I said, I mean, really, this game was pretty cut and dry from the beginning. The first, second, third quarter, it was neck to neck when Florida answered, Ole Miss answered. It wasn't the most high scoring game, which I had expected from the beginning. I know a lot of people went into this ball game. And like I said, I just really believe, and we talked about it, in our Wednesday show. I just believe that that Florida was very underestimated. I think that there was that hope that DJ Lagway not being 100%, but I think another key offensively that Billy Napier calling DJ Lagway in this play was that Florida was able for the first time in a very long time was to open the run game. And there was a few calculated drives that DJ Lagway was able to construct very well that I think given up the defense. And I think what we saw today, as elite as Ole Miss defense has been, we saw two times, as I'm sure you saw them, where DJ Lagway was basically in to be sacked with Chris Pupal, one of our top linebackers. And then, not too much later, Walter Nolan wrapped him up. But both those times, DJ Lagway was able to get that ball off, and being able to do that was a lot of momentum for Florida. So once again, I just think that along with Ole Miss, with the missed opportunities, there was a very big underestimating DJ Lagway and what this Florida ball club could do. We saw it against LSU, but we saw it, twice. It was very difficult, I think, for Ole Miss to be able to end the story the way that they did. But again, you got to give credit where credit was due. And DJ Lagway, like I've said from the jump, I've watched this kid from high school all the way through him now in college, and he's one of the most clutch players, and we really saw it in fruition today. Like I said, Walter Nolan, who is elite beyond means, and Chris Pupal is elite beyond means. Even getting a hold of DJ Lagway did not stop DJ Lagway from being able to do what we all know, who know DJ Lagway could do. And I think that situation really just showed that Florida was going to stay in this game. I didn't expect it to be a high scoring game. And quite honestly, when we were talking about going back to the lines and the spread, I think what we were favored 12.5 points, 9.5 points, it's kind of shifted between there. As much as I had confidence in this Ole Miss offense and this defense really kept us in here today, I just believe that DJ Lagway and this Florida ball club was going to surprise a lot of people. And once again, it did here because, again, Billy Napier made and played to the strengths of this young team. This team is very young, and I think that despite the early sentiments of Florida being somewhat of a dumpster fire, we really saw what it is capable of. So Florida Gator fans, I know, are going to be extremely excited because this young team, what they've been able to do for the past 2 weeks and what they've been able to do under DJ Lagway offensively and turn this ball club around, there's got to be a lot of excitement in Florida. And you can definitely bet that Billy Napier is no longer under the hot seat. But unfortunately, I know that we're going to hear it, Mark, from the Ole Miss fan base. There's going to be a lot of disappointment because, again, once Ole Miss has yet knocked on the door and has come extremely close, probably the closest it's been with this kind of team that you can't deny is full of elite talent. But unfortunately, this elite talent with some shaky play calls, missed opportunities, and again, it went back to not playing a clean football game, losing our center really was a storyline in the way the story was ended. This chapter closed for Ole Miss football this year.
And just to highlight DJ Lagway a little bit more, this is really the first chance that I've had to watch him play an entire game. And yeah, he's everything that he's been promoted to be. He still has a lot of learning to do. He's still going to develop his game. Obviously, he's only in his freshman season, but he can throw from different arm angles. He can put touch on the pass. He can throw with velocity from any type of, he doesn't have to be on platform on time. He can be running. He can be twisted the wrong way. He adjusted his arm angle a few times. He made a couple throws on the first touchdown drive that he eventually threw one to Elijah Badger for the touchdown that were pretty remarkable. And again, we talked about this on the Wednesday show, everyone, that DJ Lagway, number one in the nation in downfield throwing. And he did that again today. He only had 10 completions, but he produced 180 yards on 10 completions. So he's chewing up chunk plays when he throws the ball downfield. So that was impressive. Now, a couple injury notes here, and one part of this game I want to get to as well, because I know a lot's going to be focused on Jackson Dart. Obviously, he's going to take his hit for this, and the two interceptions at the end of the game. So Cam Banks was carted off the field on the first touchdown by Elijah Badger, so we'll have to check on his progress this week. Jordan Castell, a defensive back for Florida, put a big hit on Daquan Wright in the first half. He had to leave the game. That was a major hit that was originally a targeting. It was a good call that it was taken off the board as a targeting, but it was just an excellent football hit. But Daquan Wright had to leave the game. So just a couple injuries by the Rebels to keep an eye on. Leanne, one thing I wanted to bring up, J.J. Pequet obviously has been a huge factor in short yardage situations for the Rebels this year. He came into this game 12 for 12. So if you're not familiar, folks, J.J. Pequet, defensive lineman, one of the just guys that are the heart and soul of this Ole Miss team, loved by his teammates, the coaching staff, and they have found a spot for him on offense on short yardage plays, and he has been unstoppable. The guys, what does he weigh, Leanne?
I don't know. I think it was close to 314, and we have to remember, as big as this guy is coming out, he's from Oxford, of course. He went off, and he came back home. He was a tight end coming out of high school, so that's where he gets his quickness, and that's why he's been such a playmaker. But I'm really glad you bring that up, Mark, because today the Gators found a way for the first time to be able to stop him. Because, like you said, he came in clutch situation. It was obvious that the Rebels felt like J.J. Pegues, because like you said, he's 12 for 12. He's a big guy. He's really hard to stop. And today the Florida Gators found a way to stop him and to put an end to that hope of being able to use J.J. Pegues like they've normally used him in critical situations to be able to get some points on the board for Ole Miss.
They stopped him 3 times. So again, he was 12 for 12. I think he's pushing like 340. But then again, regardless
Something
of what his
like
weight was, I thought they said 340 during the ball game. It doesn't matter.
I might have misheard. It might have been 340 versus 314, but he's a big guy nonetheless. He's hard to stop, and the Florida Gators again found a way, and I think that's another storyline. The Florida Gators came in with a lot of young talent. Again, a rough start to the season. We've all talked about Billy Napier. We all talked about how everybody wanted Lane Kiffin down there in Florida Gators, and I'm sure they're singing a different tune. And I really believe that the Florida Gators, playing the situational ball that they did, was able to match up even with the elite defense that Ole Miss fought today, because we saw it firsthand how even elite defense like Ole Miss, especially when it came down, like I said, I think the turning point in the eye opener for me was seeing Walter Nolan wrap up DJ Lagway, seeing Chris Paul get hold of DJ Lagway, but again, DJ Lagway being able to find a way to get his ball club ahead. And I think that's what we saw a lot. Florida found a way. They didn't reinvent the wheel. They didn't come in not playing the Florida Gator football that we've seen them, but they played situational ball to match up to what they knew. And like I said, at the last third quarter, there was a lot of opportunity where this Ole Miss offense could have capitalized. I mean, the kind of soft coverage that the Gators were playing was pretty much a silver spoon, silver platter for that Ole Miss offense. But unfortunately, Ole Miss offense couldn't execute. They were trying, of course, to use Caden Lee, who's been very productive. He's a young kid that we talked about, Mark, this whole season that has been a playmaker. And even today, we saw that he had a rough patch and he was not able to have that strong connection in the red zone, in the backfield with Jackson Dart today.
So just to wrap it up on Pegues, regardless of what his weight is, these rosters, typically they take the big guys and they knock down their weight, and then the little guys, they usually pump up their weight. But regardless, the thing that caught my attention on this, and Greg McElroy made comments about it during the broadcast, was, again, 12 for 12. Florida stopped him 3 times on short yardage situations, and those were huge. They were 4th down plays, and they kept running him on the edge. I don't know what was going on there. I don't know if he was choosing to take it wide, but if you get a big guy going north and south, he's obviously a bulldozer. He's almost impossible to stop going straight ahead north and south. You get him at an angle when he's running east to west down the line of scrimmage, and he becomes much easier to take down. And that just seemed to be an odd thing, that he kept running wide instead of taking it right between guard and center like he usually does.
No, I agree with you there. There was some interesting play calling. Like I said, I don't think that the Rebels shifted too much for their normal play call. But like you said, taking a big guy like that, that he can get down the center. So why? That's a point in a situational call that you've seen be success. Why would you take him away from the norm? And like I said, there was a couple play calls that, you could question that, especially in the 4th down situation, that has been a constant criticism for the Rebels and Lane about, the 4th down situations, not being able to get there. But that could be something said. I was really surprised, like Mark, and I'm glad you pointed that out, that instead of letting Pegues take it like he normally does down the center, because, he's got size, that's where his comfort zone, but yet they chose to call him in a situation where he's running outside on the edge, east to west. And we saw that Florida was prepared for it, and they knew that what was going on, and we knew that was going to be a vulnerability. So that was a very interesting call that I thought that was kind of straying away from the norm. You want to take risks, you want to try something new, you want to keep the Florida defense, especially when you have a guy like Pegues in there. But at the same time, why stray away from a formula that has worked consistently throughout the season? And that's why you put a guy like JJ Pegues in there. So, like you said, we can sit here all day and talk shoulda, woulda, coulda. But again, it was just evident today that I think that the Florida Gators were underestimated. We knew that this was going to be a very difficult atmosphere to play in. I mean, Ruby had talked about it. We all talked about it. Going into the Swamp is a difficult place to play, especially during the day game. And again, credit to Billy Napier and his staff for calling a game and playing to their strengths. But Florida played situational ball, and I think that's what gave them the advantage against, a very, very talented. I can't stress that enough. We're going to hear in the coming weeks, a lot of criticism because it didn't end the way that it did. Just like we heard earlier in the season when we came so close to winning at LSU, when we came so close at, against Kentucky. But again, you always hear more about the losses than you do about the wins. And I think there will be there's going to be a lot of criticism, but we can't deny that this is a talented ball club. And despite the way that it ended here today against Florida, you got to look at the upside of this. And I think that, now where do we go from here? Where do the Rebels go? They're still going to play in a bowl game, but now how do we fix this? How do we find a way with as much talent? Because the talent goes deep. This is the deepest talented ball club that we've had. So you got to give Lane credit and his staff for what they've done here. But now, where do we get over the hump? I think the biggest question is, how do we finally close the game? I think that's been the biggest thorn in Ole Miss's side. It's despite all the talent that we have. How do we have the talent that we have and execute it in closing a game? I think in the biggest and the biggest moments for this program, that's where we found difficulty, is being able to close in big games like this.
We've got an Ole Miss show every Wednesday. It's at 2 p.m. Eastern time with Leanne, myself, and Ruby Dreher. This week, it's going to be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Thanksgiving. So again, Tuesdays this week, Wednesdays typically, Tuesday this week coming up, and we do the post-game show with Leanne each and every Ole Miss game as well. Again, Trey Harris back in the lineup, made one enormous catch to get Ole Miss on the board 7-7. That was a pretty play. He beat the corner and the safety to the ball. Beautifully thrown, perfect play. Trey Harris, though, that was it for him on this day. I wanted to note a pick that John Saunders made that was a ridiculous play, just a phenomenal interception off a deflection that set up Ole Miss at midfield. And then that converted into Jackson Dart on a 4th and 2, hitting Jordan Watkins on a 4th and 2 play that Florida sniffed out, and they snuffed it out. But then Jackson Dart had to improvise and found Watkins down. And that led to a Caden Lee touchdown. They got the Rebels up 14-7. So after going down by a touchdown, Ole Miss scores twice. They go up 14-7. I'm sure a lot of people watching the game thought, okay, they're off and running. This isn't going to be much of a game. But again, we all three set it up on Wednesday. I expected a close game. I did take Ole Miss to win, but I took Florida with the 10.5 points or whatever it was. It was 10.5 when I made my prediction. So I thought the Rebels were going to squeak one out here, and they certainly had their shots on the last 2 drives of the game.
I was right there with you. I knew that this would be a high scoring game. I'm sorry. I knew that this was going to be a close game. I didn't believe it was going to be a high scoring game, just because I think that both teams knew a lot was on the line. Of course, Florida trying to shift the momentum, trying to keep the momentum that's been going on after a rough start to the season, trying to get bowl eligible, and of course for Ole Miss trying to keep their playoff dreams alive. So there was a lot on the line for both these programs, but it came down to, because first, second, third quarter, there wasn't a lot of missteps on both these teams. It wasn't this exciting, crazy game, but it was in the last 2 minutes, really, where I believe 2-3 minutes where this game was decided. But again, I'm going to go back. It was a lot of missed opportunities because, like I said, Florida gave Ole Miss a lot of opportunity to be able to execute. Like I said, that first INT, that Jackson Dart clearly was off the sidelines. You could tell that he was very disappointed, and then it got called back. So there was plenty of time on the clock for them to get off a couple plays without having to go straight to the Hail Mary as far as Jackson Dart was concerned. But again, Bryce Thornton out of Milton, Georgia. I know that Ben Reeves and that whole crew is cheering on their kid, because again, a lot of young guys, much like a lot of young guys have stepped up for this Ole Miss program. A lot of guys today in key situations for this Florida Gator team stepped up. I mean, there was a lot of true freshmen, not just offensively, but defensively, that made big plays for this game that I think give them the edge. But I'm going to go back to, I believe, like I said, for us to be able to execute, it was a game that was going to be won in the trenches, and Ole Miss losing their center and having that momentum shift, I think really made it difficult for Jackson Dart to be able to stay clean in the pocket. He was able to execute in a lot of situations, but you could tell there was a little bit of shakiness and uneasiness, because again, you can have Jackson Dart is an elite quarterback, and this is the first time he's going to gain a lot of criticism, but let's be real. This is the first time in 2 years that he's thrown a pick. So it's, and it happens because again, these are games that have a lot on the line. The momentum's different. It doesn't take away from the talent that Jackson Dart has. We know he didn't want to end his career and his run here at Ole Miss, but again, very talented quarterback. It's not the way that he wanted to write his ending, but again, in big game situations, we've seen it, 13 weeks of football. I mean, I was talking early on my radio show, Mark, when it was just a 14 playoff, it was pretty cut and dry come November, come week 13. We knew who was in, who was out. It was going to be the Alabamas, the Georgias. But now that we have an expanded playoff, I mean, there's 15 teams or, 20 teams or so right now that are still trying to knock on the door. which is just a testament of how the evolution of having an expanded playoff system is. So again, a lot of missed opportunities for the Rebels, but again, you just have to look forward and move on. You know that Lane Kiffin, of course, that plane ride back for this ball club is going to be tough. This is a tough one because again, this is probably one of the most talented teams that we've had on both sides of the ball. If it was ever going to get done, if we were ever going to make a national championship run, it was here now. But unfortunately, Florida outplayed us, and they didn't do anything, like I said, that was extravagant, that was out of the ordinary. But Billy Napier rallied his guys. DJ Lagway, again, kudos to that kid because, like I said, I've seen him, and I know people thought him not being 100%, but I also believe that Florida, what they hadn't done in a long time was open up the run, and I think that helped give DJ Lagway a lot of momentum because there was a couple plays, I don't know if you noticed it, you could tell that Napier was still a little bit cautious of protecting DJ Lagway. But even in those times, DJ Lagway worked well under pressure and he executed because, again, it could have easily, and I was really surprised that our defense, as aggressive as it wasn't able to get pressure on DJ Lagway when he wasn't 100%.
Few other things that came up in the second half that really cost Ole Miss. They muffed a punt. So that set up Florida for a field goal. They also had Caden Davis, of course, miss a field goal. He's one of the best kickers in the nation. He came back and hit one, but he had also missed one. And then one of those J.J. Pegues's runs that we talked about, that was preceded by a Juice Wells play at the goal line that I don't know why he tried to one-hand the ball. He could have caught a touchdown pass at the goal line. And then right after that, Jordan Watkins was open and Jackson Dart missed him, and they would have never needed those fourth down plays, those short yardage plays. But again, those were late third quarter plays, missed opportunities where they could have taken control of the game right there. But a lot of points left off the board. And again, when you muff a punt, give out a field goal, you've missed a possession right there. And then all these other miscues obviously led. When you only lose by one score, any one of those issues on either side of the ball could have turned this game around.
Exactly. And we knew that Ole Miss was going to not only have to put it, coming off a bye week, that was also a big concern that we talked about on the show. Bye weeks are great because you want to get rested. You want to get your players that have been injured, you want to hope, like I said, but look at the case of Trey Harris. I mean, he was in and then he was out right away. And it was tough watching him, on the sidelines because you could tell he was just disappointed in a lot of ways. And like I said, it's going to be a tough plane ride going home. But again, it's just a difficult situation for Ole Miss to be in because, like I said, the talent's there. You can't disregard the stretch that these guys have made. It's a tough way to close a chapter. But again, you got to look forward because you still got a ball game to play against Mississippi State. You definitely don't want to lose your guard on that one because, like we talked about last week, the Rebels go in there and they're going to have to dry up the tears, unfortunately, because you don't want to go with your guard down because, again, Mississippi State is looking in there. They're not the best team, obviously, in the SEC. They've had their own struggles. But in a rivalry game, much like we saw today, there's a lot of factors outside what you see in the skill set that drive a game. I mean, I noticed towards the end that you could tell that the emotions for this team were a little bit riled up. And when players have those emotions riled up, it's a lot easier to make a lot of mistakes. And we saw that with Ole Miss. We've seen that be another thorn in the side early on in the season when Ole Miss had a lot of opportunity to not lose ball games, but it came down to them not playing a clean football game. And I think we saw that here. Again, it wasn't something that Ole Miss let this game get out of hand. It's just that they didn't play a clean football game. There was a lot of missed opportunities, and the Florida Gators found a way to play situational ball. That really was, I believe, the formula. They played to their strengths, and I think that this Florida team was highly underestimated. And, Billy Napier found ways to dissect a very elite defense from the Rebels and also be able to find, not necessarily contain Jackson Dart, but put him in a situation that made it difficult for him not to have a comfort zone. Like I said, Hayden Lee's been a kid that when Trey Harris was out, Jordan Watkins has been a key component in that masterful connection that we see when you have a star quarterback like Jackson Dart. But today it just wasn't enough in the Swamp.
The final from the Swamp, Florida 24 and Ole Miss 17. So for Florida football, a lot of dire forecasts about what their season was going to look like. Well, they're going to be a huge favorite against Florida State in their rivalry game to finish the season, and they could finish 8-4, which would be a fine finish for them. For Ole Miss, they fall to 8-3. The college football playoff is most likely out, although you could probably work some magic and figure out some paths for Ole Miss if you really want to try, but you might be up late tonight trying to do so. Again, it's the Egg Bowl coming up on Friday against Mississippi State. You can join Leanne, Ruby, and myself Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Normally Wednesday, this week, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and then after every Ole Miss game as well. All right, Leanne, anything else you'd like to hit on?
No, like I said, it's just it's like we say, forward Rebels. It's not really hotty toddy kind of time, but it's going to be a tough plane ride home. There's going to be a lot of criticism, but you got to look ahead to Mississippi State closing out the season strong, winning that ball game, seeing which bowl you're going to go to, and I think just much like Georgia was a turning point for the Rebels last season, I believe that this will be a turning point for Ole Miss in where they head next. And I think a lot of it will go because, like I said, it'll go back to recruitment. And I think now, just like much when Lane Kiffin came in and realized the defensive struggles, I think today we definitely saw it that Ole Miss Rebels are going to have to go out there and they're going to have to go get some offensive linemen because, again, I think that was one of these games were won in trenches, and losing our center today, not having an ample backup to be able to help Jackson Dart have a little bit of light in such a dark fourth quarter for the Rebels. So I really believe that we learn this, we use this as a lesson. It's not the way we want it to end, but I do believe it will be a turning point and maybe a realization that the Ole Miss Rebels need to go out there come portal time, come recruitment time, that we need to go and we need to restructure the offensive line. So I think that will be a key component as far as, the off season, post Egg Bowl, post bowl game, that it's vital that we go out there and we go recruit some offensive linemen so we don't continue to have this struggle of not being able to close in big opportunities and big moments for the Ole Miss Rebels.
All right, folks, don't see any comments or questions, but we appreciate you being here. And again, I'll be here throughout the day with instant analysis on all the big games. And then you're going to see Leanne, Ruby, and myself here for Ole Miss Live on Tuesday at 2 Eastern. And be looking out for Leanne and my new show, a recruiting show that we're starting up next week. And we will drop the time and the date on that very soon. All right, everyone. Cheer up, Ole Miss Nation, Rebel Nation. Cheer up. It was an excellent season. There's still 2 games left and an 8-3, and we'll see where they play out in the college football playoff rankings, but it's not going to be real pretty this week.
Exactly. And like you said right now, just look forward and like we say, not a hotty toddy kind of day, but definitely forward Rebels and looking ahead.
All right, Leanne, thanks for being here, and we will get back together on Tuesday.
See you then.